All right, so the Miami Heat are officially on the clock. The Washington Wizards, who because of an earlier trade involving Denny Avdia, had traded up to number 14 with Portland. They take Bub Carrington. I like that pick for Washington a lot, but looking at who else is on the board for the Heat, and we're going to do no spoilers here. We're watching this live. We're not looking at Shams. We're not looking at Woj. Maybe you are, but we've got on the board left for the Heat Dalton Knecht, who evidently is the faller of today's draft. Did not think he was going to make it here to 15 with Miami. He's there on the board. Also Jacoby Walter, the two-way guard out of Baylor.
Tristan Da Silva.
One of my guys, Deron Holmes. Tristan Da Silva is still on the board, who we know worked out with the Miami Heat. Kel'el Ware, the center from Indiana, still on the board. He worked out for the Miami Heat. Jared McCain, the guard out of Duke. He also worked out for the Miami Heat. But to me, we can just start with this. I am beyond disappointed that Devin Carter went 13 to Sacramento. That was the guy I wanted all along.
Right there.
Who's the guy that you're most disappointed is no longer on the board?
Holland, I think, was a guy who had like a lot of potential there. I was buying into the idea of having that elite level defender and a guy that could bring a lot of excitement to the team. As a young player there with a lot of potential.
Holland went high, number 5 to Detroit.
Is this it? We have no idea what's going on right now.
In terms of the other guys who are already taken that were sort of thought of to be Heat targets, Rob Dillingham goes number 8 to Minnesota, who traded picks from years that aren't even real, 2030 and 2031 swap to move into that number 8 pick from San Antonio. They take Rob Dillingham, who had a connection to the Heat. I love that pick for Minnesota. I love the fit there. Zach Edey, who you and I took in our mock sort of war room thing. Zach Edey did not fall to 15. He goes number 9 to Memphis.
Yep.
Cody Williams, another guy who might have made some sense for Miami, goes to Utah at number 10. Nikola Topic goes 12 to Oklahoma City. So we're sitting here now. Dalton Knecht is the surprising guy that dropped. I think he could make sense for the Heat. You look at the guys that just work in the Heat system. Max Strus, Duncan Robinson. Dalton Knecht is like that on steroids. He thrives off of dribble handoffs. He can put the ball on the floor. Everything that Max Strus and Duncan Robinson essentially have developed into, Dalton Knecht already is. So if the Heat wanted to double down on that player type, they could certainly go in that direction. I wonder what they think about his defensive upside, his athleticism. Do they think that he could be more of a two-way guy as opposed to what Duncan Robinson and Max Strus were? It'll be interesting.
I don't know. It kind of tells me if they do take Knecht, obviously as a pro-ready scorer, do they worry about his fit and having Tyler on the roster? Does the acquisition of Knecht, if they get him, make it easier to possibly explore more hero trades in the future?
I think
certainly a possibility.
Definitely possible. I think they have to go with more of a guy who's a combo guard, somebody who can play make a little bit, somebody who can grow into that role. And the name that we've also heard a lot of connected to Miami is Jared McCain. For a lot of obvious reasons. Knockdown three-point shooter. The Heat can always use more three-point shooting. He's a developing playmaker. Tries really hard on defense even though he's undersized. Everything you hear about McCain, at least from an intangible standpoint, sounds like it checks all the Heat character boxes.
Yeah. Obviously a Duke connection in the Miami Heat front office too. So do they explore that possibility? Right now, gun to your head, you've got to make a pick. Who does Miami take at 15? Knecht, Da Silva.
I don't know that they saw Knecht falling. I'm going to go with the guys that we've heard connected to the Heat. I'm going to go McCain.
McCain, huh?
I'm going to go McCain.
I think they go with Da Silva. He's a guy who fits a lot of the same similarities as Jaime Jaquez, a guy who's very ready. He's a little bit older, does everything well. Maybe not the most explosive, but a high IQ guy who could do so many different things.
I like Da Silva. I think his feel is really underrated. He is high IQ. He's a good cutter, high release point on the shot. You could see him fitting in right away. But everything has pointed us towards a guard. And I think you and I have had our doubts about why Miami would draft a guard. But they have been pointed in that direction over and over again, whether it's Rob Dillingham, Bub Carrington, all these guys that they have been rumored to be interested in. And you look at the guys that they've brought in for workouts, it's a lot of guards.
Yes.
And I do think with I do wonder what it would look like if Zach Edey were on the board right now, but I still believe that Devin Carter was their number one option. I think they're going to go in the other direction. So,
holy cow.
What?
Holy cow.
We have it?
Yep. Kel'el Ware out of Indiana is the number 15 pick for the Miami Heat.
Kelel Ware, according to Shams. So they worked out Kelel Ware. All right, instant reaction. The guard stuff was a smokescreen, or perhaps the guards that they wanted were no longer on the board, with Rob Dillingham and Devin Carter off the board. I think that they were interested in also adding size. Zach Edey was chosen at 9. They worked out Kelel Ware. They also worked out Yves Missy. They go with Ware. They go with the upside. 7 feet tall with a 7'4" wingspan. 3-point shooting potential. I think this is more of a project than most people think, but I'm okay with it. I think I've been very open about maybe not being the biggest Kelel Ware fan, but I think this is the best spot he could possibly go in terms of a coaching staff that could develop him and an infrastructure that could support him with having Bam Adebayo there. What do you think about the Ware pick?
I'm intrigued, man. I'm intrigued. The thing is, I cannot discount what the Miami Heat scouting department does. If they know what he's capable of and they see something in terms of the intangibles, because I think that's the biggest question with Ware is, does he have the motor? Does he have the drive?
Right.
Especially on the defensive end. Those are things that matter so much to the Heat. I don't think they would take a chance on somebody like that if they weren't convinced that he had those qualities there. So when you look at his potential in terms of size, youth, talent, floor spacing ability as a 7-footer, a legit 7-footer, he's immediately the biggest guy on the Miami Heat roster.
Yes.
That is a big swing for Miami, literally and figuratively. And I think that they see something in him that could make him a productive member of this team. And as we've talked about many times before, I think it's starting to open the door for Bam Adebayo to slide down to the power forward position.
I think that's the idea. A guy 7 feet tall with a 7'4" wingspan, like you said. He's a shot blocker. He's a rebounder. But more than anything, he's a lob threat. Here we go. Let's react live to the Adam Silver announcement.
The Miami Heat select Kel'el Ware from Indiana University.
He's the biggest guy that he'd have had since Hassan Whiteside. I think there's some similarities in terms of the shot blocking potential there. He needs to add weight in order for him to be a full-time center.
Muted response here from the crowd at the Miami Heat watch party.
We all wanted Devin Carter.
I think there's certainly that.
I also think he was the more. We got a "Let's Go Heat" chant happening here. All right. So, look. I'm going to talk myself into this pick. You said it already. You trust the Heat scouting department. I had to talk myself into the Bam Adebayo pick. I'm going to have to talk myself into the Kelel Ware pick. I love theoretically what he is. When I watch the tape on him, the theoretical Kelel Ware and the real-life Kelel Ware were two different Kelel Wares. He played more like LaMarcus Aldridge than he did Jaren Jackson Jr. He played more like him than he did Miles Turner. But that's the comp that he gets, and that's the potential that he has. He shot 41% or 42.5% on threes last year for Indiana, but on really low volume. But the shot is there. I think he could do it. If he can stretch the floor, we're talking about maybe a 3-man front court with Kelel Ware, Bam Adebayo, Nikola Jovic. Two of those guys can already shoot threes. One of them in Bam is working on it. I think I like the potential. I love the potential here. And if Heat believe they can make the most out of Kelel Ware, then I believe them.
I just can't dispute what they've done. You know, they lock in on their guy. They find the right player that has that upside, and that he has the intangibles, as you pointed out many times.
Right.
He has to be a high character guy. If that's the case,
I do like the fact that he transferred to Indiana because he wasn't getting playing time in Oregon, and he wanted to show what he could do. I actually didn't mind that. In the interviews that he gave after the transfer, I thought were really high character stuff, saying all the right things, the things that the Heat typically look for. So, look, if the Heat weren't comfortable with that part, if they weren't comfortable with the motor, if they weren't comfortable with the character stuff, they wouldn't have taken him.
No, I know. That's what I have to believe. I'm convinced of it. You know, there's questions outside of like off the court or like what drives them and things of that sort. But I think if Miami's talked to them, they don't do these things haphazardly.
No.
They research their guys. They do the background search. You wrote about it for The Ringer last year regarding Jaime Jaquez, a guy who a lot of people said was pretty limited in terms of what his ceiling was. He's like a fine multi-tool player, but he's just going to be okay.
Right.
He's not necessarily going to be a great NBA player. Well, he was third in Rookie of the Year voting because he was a really good player, you know. So I think Miami locks in on who they want. They do their due diligence. It's been the hallmark of this team for many, many years. I'm never going to be I'm not going to say I'm going to be surprised by who they take, but I'm never going to be disappointed or question their rationale because they've always done such a good job before. The previous mistake, if you want to look at it, Precious Achiuwa, in a COVID pandemic situation where they couldn't really get a lot of footage, couldn't really talk to a lot of people.
Right.
Maybe it's not the best situation, but whatever. That's kind of. He's still a valuable veteran. You know, he's just not a star or anything like that. But I like the pick, man. A 7-footer that can shoot threes, that can block shots, can be a lob threat. What's not to like?
Well, I do think that there's some things that he has to work on. If he's going to really be the guy who plays center for the Heat, moves Bam Adebayo to power forward, as is sort of the theoretical fit for him, I do think that there's some things for him to work on. I want to talk about that after this break really quick. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Gametime is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, boost from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. My favorite things about them, all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're going to spend. Plus, they have views from your seat. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Gametime is the place to get your tickets. Gametime's also great. If you're the day of the game, you can check out Gametime, find those last-minute deals, that last-minute pricing, and get a good deal to go to a Marlins game or whatever it's going to be. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back here with the official Miami Heat watch party. We're here at Vivo at Dolphin Mall talking about Kel'el Ware, the number 15 pick by the Miami Heat, a guy that worked out, a guy who theoretically checks all the boxes, exactly what the Heat have been looking for. We have tied a guy like Miles Turner. Wouldn't it be nice to get a Miles Turner or Miami so that Bam Adebayo can move over to power forward? Well, Kel'el Ware, his most common comps in terms of NBA player comps, Kel'el Ware, comp to Miles Turner, Brook Lopez. Theoretically, this is it. However, I will say this. I watched the tape on Kel'el Ware, and this is not me doubting the pick. I'm just telling you the guy's a rookie. He's young, and there's some inherent limitations into what he can do. He's light. He's light in the caboose, man. The guy's going to get pushed off the spot. He doesn't really move guards away. He can get bullied in the post. He's more of a finesse player than you'd like when in the half court. What I do like is that he has straight line athleticism and can jump through a freaking building. He is going to be a lob threat from day one, I think much in the same way that Derek Lively is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
No, Derek Lively. Like, wasn't that the knock on him last year, too?
Yeah.
A little light, a little undersized. He wound up being an incredible spark for the Dallas Mavericks on their run to the NBA Finals. Not saying that Ware is going to be that for Miami, but at least that's the vision. You know, a 7-footer, a guy who can bring all those different tools to the table. I don't know. I like it. I mean, again, I have to assume, I want to be discerning and say, oh, maybe Miami didn't get the right guy. De Silva was a guy who's probably higher on both our boards, a more toolsy player.
You know what? I will say this. I like this more than the De Silva pick. And I like De Silva. As a player, I like him more than Ware.
Upside here.
But I like the upside. I like the upside swing here. The guys that I really liked were gone. Edey was gone. Devin Carter was gone. Ron Holland was gone.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, there's not a player on the board that I'm like, man, I really wish they would have taken him. I do have some names. We should talk about that here, at least in terms of who else was on the board.
Yeah.
Jared McCain, all these other guys. But the Kelel Ware thing, I do like that he was productive. He had a 62% true shooting percentage last year at Indiana. 16 points per game. Shot 42.5% from three. Almost 10 rebounds a game. 2 blocks per game. The guy was productive.
He's 19 years old.
And he's 19 years old. And like I said, if the Heat felt like the motor was an issue, they would not have taken him.
Trailblazers are trading to the Washington Wizards the draft rights to Bub Carrington, the 14th.
Oh, wow. So the Wizards trading Bub Carrington to 76ers. That's interesting.
With the 16th pick in the 2024,
And so this pick is for the Wizards.
the Philadelphia 76ers select Jared McCain.
So McCain to
Portland?
Portland. Interesting.
He Portland
Or
weird,
Washington.
I guess. Yeah.
I'm very confused. All right, we're going to have to figure that out. But in terms of Kelel Ware, I'm okay with it. Do you think he was the number one guy on their board, or do you think he was the best player? Do you think he was simply just the best player available?
No, I think he was a guy on their board. Because once you see a guy like Connect, who so many people had as a top 7-8 pick, drop, to me that says they weren't convinced of what Connect could do. They already have a Tyler Hero on the roster. No need to get a guy like Connect necessarily. And so when you look at what Ware, I mean, they worked out De Silva. They worked out lots of other guys that were within that range, McCain included. But they didn't select them because they were so high on the potential for Ware. And I think that's where we're at. We saw what Nikola Jovic did this past year in terms of putting on muscle and weight. I think Ware's going to spend some time in the weight room this summer, and I think he's going to spend most of the season in Sioux Falls. I guess he would spend some time in Sioux Falls, and he's going to get some experience. And then next season, he's going to be much more productive. The 25-26 season is when I expect him to be more of an impactful player.
If the Heat can play faster than what they're accustomed to playing, I think Ware makes a lot of sense in terms of a guy who can run the floor, get to the basket. His numbers at the rim were really strong, and I think that's the part that I like. And the fact that I think we buy into the fact that he's a three-point shooter, right? With a guy like Zach Edey, that was more of a question mark. It was, can this guy really space the floor? This, to me, is an indication that the Heat are looking at their team in a modern way. We want to be as close to 5-out as we possibly can, understanding that we're not going to be a 5-out team the way that the Celtics were, because we're built around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, who are not floor spacers. But everybody around them is going to be a floor spacer. Maybe this is more of an indication also that, you know what, we know Jimmy's coming back, and we can't afford to take somebody who doesn't space the floor, which is also maybe why we were pointed into the direction of Jared McCain, Rob Dillingham, all these other guys who project as floor space, even a Devin Carter, more guys that project as guards, backcourt, floor spacing guys. Having Kelel Ware there, I don't know. We saw with Derek Lively, for instance. You're right about the similar sort of slights against them, but by the time they got to the Western Conference Finals, all that stuff was gone.
Yep.
That guy was, and he still got bullied off the spot in the NBA Finals. He wasn't able to at least physically take advantage of being covered by a guy like Jason Tatum. I don't think anybody expects Kelel Ware to do that. I don't think Kelel Ware walks in day one and says, I'm the center. I'm going to defend centers. He's not ready to defend the guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and all those guys. But there's going to be some nights where he doesn't have to. Porzingis is more of a finesse guy. He plays on offense out on the perimeter. I think that works. He's tall enough to just put his hands up on the perimeter and just say, shoot it over me, dude. And I do think that there's going to be a role for him to play. So does this mean that the starting lineup day one will be Kelel Ware at center and Bam Adebayo power forward? I don't think so. I think Kelel Ware is going to be the backup. But the vision eventually, I think at least, if this works out, will be that. Will be Ware at center and Bam Adebayo between now and when his contract is up in 2029 will eventually be able to move the power forward. But I do think that they're going to spend time on the floor together, and depending on the matchup, either Ware will defend the other centers, if it's a lighter center, a smaller one that they can get away with it with. But there will also be matchups where Bam still has to do it, right? If it's Jokic, if it's Embiid, Bam's still going to have to front those guys in the post, I think. But then that puts Kel'el Ware in a situation where he could be the weak side defender and play more of a Jaren Jackson Jr. type role, where he's coming in and swatting shots. I think that could be interesting for them.
Is he quick enough to switch if they go for the switch-heavy defense, or is he more of a drop option for Miami at this point?
It feels like that's more of a drop option for them, and I'm okay with that. It's like if they had taken Edey, that's sort of what I envisioned. Right. But you can drop your front court guy and still switch everything else. You can drop your center and switch 1 through 4, which is often what Boston would do last year. So I think there's a way for this to work. Like I said, I'm talking myself into the pick.
I mean, it certainly gives Miami an option that they didn't have last year. Like, I think they wanted Orlando Robinson to bloom after his Summer League performance. They were hopeful that Thomas Bryant could provide a spark. None of those things happened. And so they took a chance on what's more typical with the modern-day NBA center. A guy who can space the floor, but can also block shots at the rim, is tall enough, has a nice wingspan, provides a lot of different options there as a rim threat. I don't know, man.
So, no, that's a great point. The Heat have been trying to do this. This is not a novel idea for them. They have been trying to do this, but they were trying to do it with undrafted guys. Omer Yurtseven, Orlando Robinson. Orlando Robinson, not a great athlete. Huge person, not a great athlete. Omer Yurtseven, humongous body, not a great athlete. The one thing that you could say about Kel'el Ware, elite size with his height and his wingspan and his standing reach. Elite size, elite athleticism. This is a tool the Heat have never had before. Never had before. And that part to me is interesting here. It's you tried it with Orlando, you tried it with Omer Yurtseven, now you have a real ball of clay to work with here. Let's talk a little bit more about maybe the guys that the Heat passed up on. We'll do that here after the break.
And with the 17th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Los Angeles Lakers select
back here with Locked On Heat. We've got the live watch party happening in front of us here at Vivo at Dolphin Mall. Awesome hospitality. Great little setup here. Thanks for everybody tuning in live now who tuned in for our pre-draft show. Great pick for the Lakers. Dalton Connect going to the Lakers that's a phenomenal fit.
They've already got Austin Reeves on the roster, though.
That's a shooter. You need shooting around LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Fair enough.
So in terms of who the Heat passed up on, Dalton Connect was one of the guys they passed up on. What did you think about them passing on Connect?
Well, I think with the presence already of Tyler Hero on the roster
and Duncan,
you're looking at a bucket. Yeah, you're looking at bucket getters, scorers, and guys that might be limited defensively. That's already a problem with Miami's roster. You need to get somebody else. You don't need to get somebody else that provides the same set of weaknesses that two current players on the roster have. Had they selected Connect, I thought that would have indicated Miami was probably in the works of a Tyler Hero trade.
Interesting.
So that's how I interpret it. The fact that they didn't take Connect means that they're planning on either keeping Tyler or moving Tyler at a different time for somebody else to provide some scoring, because that's going to be an area of need for Miami regardless.
I guess you could say the same thing if they would have taken Jared McCain.
Right.
Those were the two highest guards on big boards. Jacoby Walter was on the board at the time. I don't know if he's still available. I haven't been paying enough attention. He is.
Walter,
I liked him as sort of like a Tavius Caldwell-Pope hybrid. I'm higher on Walter's upside than I think consensus is. I think he's got good feel and competitiveness. They worked him out. I thought that might have been an interesting selection. One of my guys, Deron Holmes, the second, still on the board, correct?
Yes.
So we'll see where he falls.
So
and then we mentioned Tristan De Silva. Yeah. Who else?
Isaiah Collier.
Isaiah Collier was on the board. Filipowski on the board. Ryan Dunn on the board. Tyler Kolek on the board. Look, based on who was available, I have zero problem with the Kel'el Ware pick. I don't have a problem with it. I think you hit something on the head right there too. They addressed an area of need. This draft pick gives us zero hints as to what the rest of this offseason is going to look like, right? Had they taken a guard, you're probably right. They're probably looking at moving either Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, because if you take another guard, you probably want that guy to play. But there's already minutes there for Kel'el Ware. Backup center has not been a solid position for this team for a few years now, whether it was Dwayne Dedman, Omer Yurtseven, Thomas Bryant, Orlando Robinson. Kevin Love he's going to opt into that $4 million contract, but he's getting older, and he was played off the floor in that first-round series against Boston. They needed to address backup center, whether it was with the 15th pick, the 43rd pick, or free agency or trade or something. They did it here, but we don't really know what else they're going to do this offseason based on this pick, other than the fact that I do think that this is a Heat team, and I said this in our pre-draft show, that is built through the draft. If you think about what they did with Kel'el Ware, they have now selected Kel'el Ware, Nikola Jovic, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. with their last 3 first-round picks. All long, athletic players who play different positions and provide a certain amount of versatility. I think we're seeing what the Heat value based on not just this pick, but over the last 3 years.
You know, the way I look at it, too, is they didn't take the quote-unquote best player available. They actually went with an area of need more than anything else. A specific player that they wanted, a big with floor spacing ability. I think if you look at the best player available, it probably would have been Connect, at least from according to a lot of mock drafts.
Right.
So it's interesting, you know, a lot of people recommended that Miami should just take BPA, best player available. It probably would have been Connect. The fact that they went with Ware, again, I think that they're looking for something specific in terms of addressing need, size, versatility, floor spacing ability.
Are we sure Connect wasn't in their mind, or are we sure that Ware wasn't in their mind the best player available?
Can't tell.
Connect slid.
Yeah,
there's a lot of teams that weren't sold on Connect, right? I think there's obvious questions about his upside and his athleticism. Like, what is best player available, right? Like, we just say best player available. Like, what is that? Are we talking about the best player right now?
Right.
Best player today? Or are we talking about the best player 4, 5, 6 years from now? And if you go by ceiling, I don't think that anybody doubts that Kel'el Ware probably has a higher ceiling, although his floor is probably a little more shaky, or certainly shakier than Connect. Connect walks into an NBA team, and you know exactly what he's doing, right? Connect is going to the Lakers, and he's like, I'm here to shoot the ball. Just pass me the rock, and I will make those open shots. In Miami, he obviously could have played that role, but I don't know what his upside is ultimately, and I think that's why he fell. And it's I was honestly always a little dubious about Connect's upside and him being like a shoe-in top 10 guy. We know how teams treat the draft, man. Saloon went 6?
Yeah.
He's not a better player right now than Connect, but his upside is such that teams are just like, you know what? We got to take a swing here. So I think Connect went where he had to go.
Tristan Da Silva going to the Orlando Magic. If he develops the way that a lot of Heat fans think he will, that's going to be a thorn in their side for many years, a divisional rival.
Interesting. Tristan Da Silva compares himself to Franz Wagner, and now he gets to learn from Franz Wagner. So I like that pick for Orlando a lot. Like a lot. That's a great pick for them.
I know our contemporary over at Locked On Magic is ecstatic about it. He thinks he had him like the top 5 on his board, so he's overjoyed right now.
So going back to Kel'el Ware, what do you think? How many minutes per game will we see Ware and Bam together?
Oh, boy. I don't know. I cannot tell you that because I think, again, he is a raw developmental project. So a lot of it will depend on what we see from him in Summer League. Like, I think we wouldn't have expected Jaime, as ready-made as he was, to play for the Miami Heat as much as he did this past season. But he showed out so completely early on in Summer League. Then he got hurt. But in training camp, he was the guy that popped. Everybody said so. The veterans all respected what he brought to the table. He was an immediately impactful player. I don't know that we can say the same for Ware. I would have tempered expectations for year 1. And that's fine because eventually you're going to get a star-level player with size and floor spacing ability. At least that's the way the Heat see it. That would be my expectation. They could have gone with a more ready-made player in Connect, but they went with a guy with higher upside who can translate into a great specific role player for them. Floor spacing big, something they have not had
Ever.
Kevin Love is the closest approximation.
Right.
He's at 36 years old. It's not exactly the best option.
And at 6'8",
Right.
a power forward masquerading as a center because of his old age almost.
Right.
the idea that the Heat were always going to take the older guys, I always thought that was not accurate. I mean, just because they took Jaime Jaquez last year didn't mean that they were always going to take 22 and 23-year-olds, because they took Jovic the year before that.
I did, yeah.
And so I think we just have this recency kind of bias, not even a bias, but like this like short-term memory with the Miami Heat. Like, they're a team that once the 8th seed, they only care about the play-in tournament and taking 23-year-olds. It's like 2 years ago they were the 1 seed and they were taking Nikola Jovic. They couldn't be the more. So they take the player who they think is the best player for them on the board.
Yeah.
And I think Kelel Ware was that. I'm going to go ahead and say I think they got to try it. I think they will try it earlier in the year. I think we'll see something like 6-7 minutes a game with them both on the court together. If they can get a rotation of Bam, Ware, and Jovic as their 3-man front court rotation, and maybe you get some spot minutes for Kevin Love, maybe there's another minimum level free agent center, maybe Thomas Bryant opts back in, maybe they still have Orlando Robinson still on the roster, right? There'll be some minutes around to go around. But I think they got to really try this, because if it does end up sort of being a run it back year, you got to have something. You got to show me something different than last year. And part of that would be moving Bam to power forward, or at least with Ware, even if he's not guarding other centers, he's providing 2 things that the Heat didn't have last year. That's a vertical lob threat, and that's shot blocking. And maybe he's the guy that's doing the weak side shot blocking, help defense stuff.
You mentioned that trio. I'm excited about that possibility. You know, they're so versatile. Like, we saw Nico develop into a solid defender. And I think that's what the vision for him is, that they can develop into an even better defender. He's still so young, but he can space the floor. You have an all-NBA defender in Bam Adebayo, and then you got a guy in Ware who at the very least can block shots if nothing else. But he can also provide all this kind of versatility offensively that they don't currently have on the roster at a legit 7-foot size. There's so many different permutations that Eric Spoelstra, this is going to be the biggest challenge for Eric Spoelstra, because a lot of his critics say he's not a guy who can implement a big appropriately into the lineup. Now he's got his big. What can he do with him?
It's a great test for the coaching staff, for the development program, and for Eric Spoelstra. And I said this before, I think we confuse versatility with lack of specialization. And last year's Heat team was not versatile. As much as people, and Eric Spoelstra included, they wanted to say it was versatile. We're versatile. No, you're just not good at anything. And that's not versatility. That's lack of specialization. Kelel Ware is a specialized player. He is 7 foot with a 7'4" wingspan. He's going to swat shots. He needs to do a better job of keeping them in bounds. But these are all things that the coaching staff can work with. He is a ball of clay, unlike this coaching staff and this developmental program has ever had. And that is really exciting. He's unlike Nikola Jovic even, right? As raw as Jovic was when he was drafted. He's got elite size, elite athleticism, and you can see exactly what he can become. The blueprint is there with guys like Jaren Jackson and Miles Turner. It's up to him and the Heat coaching staff to turn him into those guys. And if he becomes that, this pick looks like a home run 4 or 5 years from now. In a draft where they said it was weak and there was no great players, there's going to be good players that come from this draft. And I do think sometimes we confuse the prospect, or we dial too much into the prospect and don't think enough about the situation that player is getting drafted to. And had Kelel Ware gotten drafted somewhere else, he could end up being Marquise Chris. But because he was drafted to Miami, he's going to have, I think at least, a real opportunity to succeed.
This is something we've done in the past when we've done our Blue Notebooks. What do you see his ceiling as in Miami? Is he a superstar, potential all-star, end-of-the-bench kind of guy? I think he has the possibility of being a mid-level, high contributor.
I think like whatever Miles Turner is, like a 20-10 guy who's really important to his team.
All-star capability.
Like maybe makes an all-star 1 year because of injuries or something. And that's fine. I think that's a totally fine outcome for him.
Yeah, I just...
His absolute, like, all bets are off, take the chains off ceiling would be Jaren Jackson Jr. It would be an all-star, all-NBA, defensive player of the year type. I will never project the 15th pick reaching that. Yeah. But if you're talking about like actually like what is his best possible scenario in a million galaxies, there's one where that happens for him.
I want him to show some intensity that he has not shown at this point.
I agree.
Like even when you mentioned Turner and Jaren Jackson, they're not I've got that dog in me kind of player.
Right.
You know, you see they're more finesse, whatever. I don't want to say they're
That's
soft.
my worry with Ware, is he is a little bit of a finesse guy. I said this, he went way too much into that LaMarcus Aldridge spin move, fade away. He moved. My biggest thing when we were doing our Blue Notebook on Ware and all the other centers, my biggest thing was the comparison between Ware and Yves Missy. And Yves Missy popped off the screen to me because he always finished forward. He was always finishing leaning towards the basket. And Ware always finished kind of leaning away from the basket unless he was dunking. And I need to see a higher level of physicality from Ware for him to really succeed. And that is maybe the bigger difference between him and Lively, is I think Lively wanted to do it, but he just like couldn't do it against every competition. And I'm not sure Ware wanted to do it in Indiana. I need to see him try it. And again, I think the Heat made the bet that they can get him to do it. There's all the tools are there. The guy is so young. It's not fair to say he can't. I'm not saying he can't do anything. I'm just telling you what I saw on film, and these are the areas why he fell to 15. Like if he was doing all these things, we're talking about a 7'1" center with a three-point shot. That player is usually picked in the top 5.
Yeah.
There's a reason he was on the board at 15. I think the Heat's coaching staff can get him to be that guy.
No, I agree 100%. Like they have to. They don't have any questions regarding his intangibles in that sense because they wouldn't have taken him otherwise. So the biggest question mark that a lot of people who are not fans of the pick maybe would say, it's his personality, whatever. But if the Heat feel comfortable taking him, then I feel like they can address those needs and they see something in him that maybe he didn't show at the collegiate level. We've seen this before. Like again, Bam Adebayo has turned into one of the great workhorses of the NBA, as you've said many times. A guy that everybody wants to play with. What was he at Kentucky? An okay player.
A backup.
Yeah, an okay player. Who was he backing up? Was it Willie Cauley-Stein?
Willie Cauley-Stein.
That's the fear. I don't want Ware to develop into Cauley-Stein.
Well, that's why I'm talking about the situation. If Kelel Ware gotten drafted somewhere else, I would have been worried about him. But he got drafted to Miami. You talk about that dog in him, that competitiveness. Bam's not going to let him off the hook. Jimmy's not going to let him off the hook. Udonis Haslem, who's still around, not going to let him off the hook. Malik Allen, maybe the best big man coach in the NBA, not going to let him off the hook. If you're Kelel Ware and you're a matchmate, if you were drafting teams that you got picked to, if you were doing this like a reverse draft style, how many teams is going above Miami if you're Kelel Ware and you're in charge of where you're going? If this is sort of an open market.
Yeah.
I think it's the best possible landing spot for Kelel Ware. And again, I love the upside swing here. I love the fact that they got a guy. I've been talking about this forever. What does this team not have? Elite size and elite athleticism. Well, they just got that twice. They doubled down on elite size and elite athleticism, Kelel Ware. All right, we're going to have plenty of time to digest this pick. 2 questions for you. Do you think this influences at all what they do in the second round? What position, if any, are you targeting in the second round? And then I'll ask you a different question about the offseason after that.
I think they'll look more for a wing-type player, somebody to replace Caleb Martin or even a guard that could address some of the needs they might have as far as scoring is concerned. My thought would be they would take a wing player in the second round, whoever's available.
I think you're right. Depending on what happens with Haywood Highsmith, even if he does re-sign, it still feels like they might be a guy short there.
Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be a big swing, but maybe just like another guy on the minimum somewhere there. I still think that they could go and find another backup center, another guy who could play minutes, depending on whether or not Kelel Ware, just insurance in case Kelel Ware is a rookie.
You just want Adam Boat on this roster.
Who? Adam Boat? No, yeah. I want Goga Patadsky. That's the guy I want. I said, go sign him for the minimum. We have the Kelel Ware interview over here. And I do think that they need to address the backup point guard position as well, depending on whether or not DeLon Wright stays or not. So you could pay attention to the interview. I don't want to fill it with dead air here, but this is strange. All right. So we did not do the Zoom interviews with him. We'll probably get into the next availability with Kelel Ware, but yeah, I think in the second round, any position. Probably not a center, but I could see them going with a guard or just a perimeter position, a guard or a wing or something like that. I could see them going in that direction. I think there is a need for backup point guard, which is why I think the Heat were tied to point guards in the first round. I don't think that goes away. I think they could still go after a guy like Tristan Newton from UConn potentially in the second round. Maybe they go with more of a scoring kind of guard or a wing player like I said this wrong yesterday. Pelle Larson, Cam Spencer, these kind of guys. Who makes sense? I would love for Harrison Ingram to drop to number 43. I think that would be a home run pick.
That's the one, yeah.
More length, more athleticism, more defense. Give me all of it. But we'll see what happens. Any other thoughts before we close it out here?
No, I'm excited about the pick. I think Heat fans should be too.
I'm excited about the pick. I'm excited about the prospect. I love that the coaching staff gets to work with him, and I'm really excited that we're even with Jovic, he was like an elite feel guy, right? Jaime Jaquez was like a high floor guy. Kel'el Ware is the first swing that they made here, right? This is the first guy who really is a swing here. So I don't know that this Heat coaching staff has gotten a chance as much as great work as they have done with undrafted guys, whether it be Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent. These are inherently limited players because of their lack of elite athleticism. This is a top 1% type athlete that this Heat coaching staff, this development program, has never gotten a chance to work with. I think they're really excited about this pick too.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to close it out there. We will be back for tomorrow night's second round, the Heat picking number 43. We'll have more analysis on this pick. We'll have more about what it means. And, of course, Locked on Heat with you 5 days a week, all through the offseason. If you missed our show earlier, we talked about Jimmy Butler coming back to Miami, it sounds like. We talked about Bam Adebayo signing an extension. We talked about Haywood Highsmith maybe negotiating a new contract. This is where you got to stay. 5 days a week, all offseason long for the Miami Heat. You can find Locked on Heat on YouTube. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for joining us live, Vivo, Dolphin Mall for the official Miami Heat watch party.